Well, welcome to Dementia Chats today. Once again, we're going to have a really interesting conversation that I think every single person needs to listen to, especially families, doctors, and of course, those living with the disease. And the topic is the diagnostic journeys, that the ever-changing situation that people have to deal with when they have dementia. Typically, it's not just one thing that they're dealing with, and the plug is pulled and all of a sudden it's changed, and it's very frustrating, not only to them but to everyone else. And I don't think it's necessarily taken very seriously by the medical professionals personally. I don't think they get the impact they're having with all of these changes, and yet we all know that stress can make symptoms worse. So I think you're going to learn a lot. We're going to start by having everybody introduce themselves, and then we're going to dive into, and I think you're going to be shocked as people share how often a diagnosis has changed. So Michael, I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce yourself first, please.
My name is Michael Ellenbogen. I'm an international dementia advocate and connector, and I've been at this for a pretty long time.
Thank you. And Laurie?
My name is Laurie Scherrer, and this is my service dog, Little Dog. I'm an international speaker and on the board of directors of Dementia Action Alliance, and on many other things, because I really think that while we have voices, we need to share them.
Wonderful. True?
My full legal name is Truthful Loving Kindness, and my symptoms became noticeable in February of 1999. Current diagnosis is still mild cognitive impairment because now they're moving slowly. And I'm very active in Dementia Mentors, blogging, etc.
Thank you. Cate?
Hi there. My name is Cate Lau. I was misdiagnosed with Alzheimer's, and later on diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. I'm involved with a local advocacy, and I'm a bit dazed this morning, foggy. Yes, and I'm an admin for Forget Me Not, and very involved with Dementia Mentors and several other groups.
Great. Thanks, Cate. And Karen, how about you?
So I'm kind of like forgetting. First of all, I was diagnosed initially with Alzheimer's in 2014. It got changed to unspecified symptoms of dementia, and I'm something else right now. And I think it's just mild neurodegenerative with probable dementia or whatever my little title is now. I don't care. I have brain change.
Thank you. And Edgar?
My name is Edgar Cortes. I'm a disabled Marine, author, activist, and founder of Lucidity Inc. And at Understanding Neurocognitive on Instagram. I'm diagnosed with TBI, PTSD, MCI, number of other things, and recently retinitis pigmentosa in both eyes. And I have my settled upon diagnosis at the moment is major neurocognitive disorder due to TBI, and I'm just turned 51. And it took about 30 years to get to that diagnosis.
Okay, thank you. Laurie, I'm going to have you kind of kick us off regarding this conversation and thoughts, because I know you're not feeling good in case you have to scoot off and just lose energy. I want to make sure that we hear from you.
Thank you. Diagnosis process is very difficult. First off, the original diagnosis, all the testing they put you through, and then you finally get a diagnosis, and you go through grief, you go through dealing with it, and then boom, another doctor changes the diagnosis on you. So now you go through it all over again with a different diagnosis and dealing with that. I have someone who I mentor who's 56 years old. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, was involved in a research study, was taking medication for Alzheimer's. And recently, she was re-diagnosed as having MCI, impacts your disability because MCI is not necessarily accepted as a Social Security disability disease. And yet, when we go to color, she'll go, I have this. Let me see your picture. I have this. She can't tell me what a crown is. When she's eating breakfast, she can't say eggs or avocado, has no idea what's on her plate. She doesn't remember her children's names, often not her husband's name, and yet they re-diagnosed her as MCI. I have seen where many of us go through this. I was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's and FTD, needed to change doctors, and the new doctor said, well, I'm not sure what you have, but I don't think it's FTD, so we're going to put you through some more testing. And I said, is it going to change what medications I'm not taking? Because I won't take the medications because they're not proven to do anything. She said, no. I said, okay, is it going to change anything I'm doing now? If you change the diagnosis? She said, no. I said, well, then I am not going through another 30 hours of testing because it's horrible. So what the doctors don't realize is when they change your diagnosis, you've already possibly been on disability. And if they change it to MCI, it can kick you off disability. What they also don't realize is what they do to the patients mentally, what they do to our cognitive abilities. They pull us down, and that's hard. And yet I see it happening over and over and over again. It's very difficult to see what's happening to other people because of the doctor's re-diagnosis.
I remember when they first came in and announced MCI, and everyone at one point was pretty much told they had Alzheimer's disease. And I remember everybody saying, there is nothing mild about this. And, who's this joke supposed to be on? Because first of all, it was a horrible title because anyone who has those issues doesn't feel that it's mild. And Laurie, I think you bring up some great points in terms of struggle as it is when you can't work. And then if they're screwing with your disability, I mean, that needs to be taken into account because the amount of stress that puts on the person with the dementia, their family, it's just so wrong on so many levels. And again, being compassionate to understand the stress level going through the diagnostic process is. I remember seeing my own mom, and she went through 2 half days and she was like a wet noodle. I mean, she couldn't function, she couldn't talk, she was so depressed because all it did was push in her face what she couldn't do, what she wasn't able to do. And it was so sad because you go through that process of adapting, and then all of a sudden you're like smacked down again, through that. And I think, you addressing the doctor, what's going to change? What's the point? There needs to be a point other than someone's going to collect a paycheck for going through tests and getting another appointment and maybe another prescription out of you. So thank you for sharing. True, I'm going to go. Oh, well, perfect. Your hand's up. I was going to go to you next.
The exception to that rule, I think, is Lewy body, because it is so crucial to be aware of the Lewy body medical sensitivities that often, medication sensitivities that often go along with Lewy body. If you have Lewy body on your chart, then when you say, no, I want you to check the Lewy body association medications, whether that is going to be a problem for me or not, then they'll listen to you. If you do not have Lewy body on your chart, they don't listen to you. Even though you say, I have Lewy body symptoms, they say I'm at high risk for Lewy body, they don't listen because it's not on your chart.
Laurie, go ahead.
Sorry, I hit it twice. It doesn't matter if it's on the chart. And we have someone that comes into our group who was originally diagnosed with Lewy body, in my opinion, has every symptom of Lewy body with hallucinations. And yet recently he was re-diagnosed as not having Lewy body, but having MCI. And now he's got to be careful what medications they tell him to take, because the doctor said it's not Lewy body anymore. And it's so clear that he has Lewy body. But this is where it's really difficult to see what is happening to people. Although I was diagnosed with FTD at the beginning, the doctor gave me donepezil. Donepezil is known to increase FTD symptoms. And I went down like a rocket. My husband thought within a year he'd have to have full-time care for me. The doctors aren't looking at, not all doctors, most. They don't take into consideration the impact of medications, and maybe they don't realize how these medications can impact people. But even if you have a previous diagnosis of Lewy body or FTD or whatever, the doctors decide what they're going to decide for now. And that's it, which is really can be very harmful if the patient or the family, or if the person living with dementia or the family is not paying attention to medications and ignoring the doctor's new diagnosis. It can be very harmful.
Yeah, this diagnosis is so tricky. And most doctors will admit that. But why they don't have a talk and to go to get a consultation with a pharmacist who actually knows these drugs and what's going on between them, it's just really asinine. And I know that there's not a ton of pharmacists that have that certificate, but most pharmacies have at least one that can do that. But to be able to get an appointment, to be able to see what the contra indications are with this stuff, and to even be able to tell that pharmacist, because I think they would listen. They had me diagnosed with this. I still have all these symptoms. They've changed it to this, and I'm concerned. I think they would more likely listen because they get it, and they see these changes all the time in the charts and stuff. So yeah, I know I'm going to probably be popping a cork by the time we're done with this, just as a care partner listening to this, but I think this is really important. True, I'm going to go back to you, and then I'm going to go up to Michael.
I also want to mention that behind the scenes, from what I've read, behind the scenes in the different facilities and universities and stuff, there is sometimes a lot of conflict between the doctors involved on what that diagnosis should be. And it's just a hair's breadth of which diagnosis it's going to go to. And then if something happens, your doctor moves or you lose that kind of insurance, you switch doctors, almost guarantee you're going to get a reevaluation and probably another diagnosis. It is really aggravating. The third point was, I have heard doctors not say to me directly, but other people, well, my doctor said this and my doctor said that, where they say, well, you're gonna, unless it shows up on a test, you're going to probably be called mild cognitive impairment until you can't dress yourself, feed yourself, etc. What do you call those daily thingy bobs? Mm-hmm. And that's what it was with my grandmother in 2000, I don't know, something. She was unable to dress herself by the time she got a dementia diagnosis.
Thank you. Michael, I'm going to pop up to you and get your opinion on this.
Well, I hear these stories every day. I've been hearing them for too long. As you know, my case in itself was a complex case. At first they thought I had Alzheimer's or semantic dementia. Then 10 years fast forward, they've identified that I have FTD. And I still believe they're wrong based on the knowledge that I have learned. that at the time one dies, you end up having 3 or 4 types of dementia. So I just don't see any way a doctor today can actually determine what you have. They can guess at it and try to determine the best they can. But the biggest problem I see is what Laurie already mentioned is like they're playing with our lives when they make these educated guesses on what we have, and that could have some serious impacts on the people, such as losing your driver's license, depending on what state you're in, or suddenly no longer able to get Social Security, SSDI, because one moment they had you as Alzheimer's and the other moment now they go back and say you have MCI. And I can't begin to tell you how many people I have spoken with that are, to me, true examples of having some sort of progressive dementia. I can't tell you what kind of dementia, because again, I'm no damn doctor, but they were serious issues to the point that they should have definitely been above MCI. And yet they can't function daily out there. And yet the doctors are giving them an MCI rating. It's like, what part are they missing? It's like, here's a person who can't function and they have an MCI. It's like, what is wrong with these people? I just don't get it. I don't get it. And that's where it's really creating a drastic impact to them financially, because they're the ones who are going to lose their job if they haven't already lost it. And yet they can't say there's something wrong with them. And that's probably the most frustrating part that I went through. I mean, for 10 years, it's like, I knew something was definitely wrong, but you go to the doctor, oh, you're depressed, you might be too stressed. It's like, you don't want to hear those things. You want to know what is contributing to your problem. And that's probably the biggest hurdle I think some of us have to go through, because we know something's wrong with us, but yet we can't get somebody to diagnose us to tell us that. And I don't know if it's getting any better. I mean, I thought it was for a while, but I got to tell you, the more I talk to a lot of these neurologists, as somebody earlier said, the neurologists don't know about dementia. Well, that's true. A lot of neurologists don't. They know about different parts of neurology, not specific to dementia. And that's the first thing I tell people to ask when they're going to try to get a diagnosis, is make sure you go to a neurologist that actually works with people with dementia or specializes in that field. And sadly to say, you almost have to go to one of these universities where they're actually doing research to find a good neurologist who understands that. And it's, in my opinion, getting worse instead of better. I do know that they're now starting to push new rules and regulations to train the doctors, but we're probably 5-10 years away before we're really educating this new staff of how and to better treat. I mean, I think just most recently, they're starting to realize that the MMSE and the MOCA, that they were maybe good at one point in time, but they're now finding difficulties that those tests aren't what they thought they were to really identify people with dementia. So they're now revisiting that whole aspect of what it takes to diagnose somebody. And that's kind of scary when you think that for 30 years, they've been thinking these are great tests to identify somebody, yet probably a lot of us here passed them with flying colors. And that kind of tells you why. So I don't know what the right answer is, to be honest with you, because I don't know. I mean, I see some of these tests, and even some of the new ones that they're coming out with, they don't make sense. And I'm also learning, or I should say I learned, that depending on where you're at in the world, those tests don't mean a damn thing, because what works in the United States will not work in China. So even though they had these MOCA tests and all, they're not something equal across all aspects of people living with dementia, depending on where you're at in the world. So they have no way to do a comparison, is what's scary, because they've been trying to look at research studies across all of the world, and they can't even do that because those tests don't work right for some of those places. So I don't know. The more I learn about this, and the more I've spent time dealing with all the key top-notch people in this world who are supposedly some of the most famous doctors and all, the more you find out there's more confusion. So I have no clue what the right way is, and I don't know how we're going to get there. I do know we're making a lot of progress. I mean, we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, but at the same time, we're also finding out that there's more confusion with all the practices that they've been using.
One side of me, looks at it as, kind of looking at like cancer, where everything was cancer, and then all of a sudden there's all these subcategories of cancer. And so I think that's part of the problem. They're realizing, oh, it's not just all Alzheimer's. There's this and there's that. And then on top of that, they're changing the terms within that. So even with the neurocognitive versus what, excuse my language, but what the hell are you supposed to call it? Because everybody calls it something different, even here in the United States. And then you add the world in, it gets even more complicated. And then another side of me says, do they not want to give the diagnosis? Because, there was a study done on this too, where a lot of doctors weren't telling people a diagnosis because they didn't know what to do for them. So do they not tell you a diagnosis if it's Alzheimer's or FTD or Lewy body or whatever, because they don't know what they can really do for it? Are they more comfortable telling you you're depressed because I can give you a pill? Or you've got anxiety, or you've got all these other things going on? I mean, sometimes I kind of wonder if that comes into play with doctors' decisions as well. Heard forever, and the story has not changed for anybody that I've heard of really, where they leave the doctor and it's, here's an appointment, here's the medication, and don't forget to get your affairs in order, and out the door you go. And that's got to feel horrible for the doctor as well as, the person with the diagnosis and the family. And if we could change some of those things, or start categorizing things actually by symptoms versus even names of stuff, because I think those categories get so hard and fast. And when I talk with all of you guys, there's so much overlap from one disease to another, and that gets complicated. Michael, you've got your hand raised.
That actually plays a big role. I've spoken to many neurologists, and exactly what you said is true, Laurie. They do not want to give you the label of having dementia if there's nothing that comes out of it that could be good for you. Because they know, and this is an example a neurologist gave me. He goes, I could go with plan A or plan B. Plan A is I just let you go out of the office knowing in my mind that you have something, and I do no paperwork. Or I do plan B, and I have to label you as having dementia. I got to go to the driver's license bureau to let them know, and I'm now a cop, and I have to tell all these people that you have dementia, which automatically triggers in some places that you're going to lose your license. And what benefits was it to the person? So plus it cost them more money and time to go down plan B. So I've spoken to them. You talk to some of these doctors, they have some very good points, to why they don't want to label you, especially when it can have real negative impact. And until we can change the society, that all because one day they put Alzheimer's on your chart, that they're not going to hold that against you to automatically take your license away just because of that. That's stupidity. Or you lose your job because all of a sudden today you're a lawyer, and today you suddenly got on your chart that says you have Alzheimer's, you're fired. That's what has to change first before I think we're going to expect some of these doctors to change their ways.
Yeah, and some of the doctors will tell you, I'm not going to put it in your chart because if you want to get long-term insurance, go do that now and stuff. Edgar, I saw your hand raised when Michael was talking, and then Laurie.
Yeah, let Lori go first. I got a couple of things to say about what everybody said, if that's all right.
Okay, Laurie.
I'm going to piggyback off what Laurie was saying and what Michael was saying, the terminology becomes an issue because we change terminology and the doctors don't keep up with it. For example, everything was Alzheimer's, and then it was the different types of dementia, and it all falls under the dementia umbrella. And then somebody said, oh, we can't call it dementia because people don't like that word. We're going to call it neurocognitive impairment. But the problem is the people that are giving out disability, the doctors that look at your disability to determine whether or not to accept you for disability, they don't know this language change. And they look at neurocognitive impairment and they go, oh, she doesn't remember things. Or they're not familiar with it. And so right away you're declined. Or you go to another doctor and they're not using that terminology, so they don't understand, they don't get what the other doctor was saying. And in addition to that, the testing, I agree with what Michael was saying. As I moved, I find that it is so different. Where you go is so different as to what the doctors are going to be labeling you, what tests the doctors will accept or not accept, and how they read those tests. So they may look at it and say, oh, all these amyloids, look at what you've got. And someone else might go, oh, well, that doesn't really mean anything. So, it's kind of, it puts you in a really bad state. So the terminology is an issue and the testing is an issue, and confusing all the way around.
Edgar?
Okay, I made some notes to what everybody else said, and I have to say it's encouraging in a way, because it's part of the reason that I developed this framework over 30 years. Because we have so many parts, so many pieces of the puzzle that we need, but we have problems that are relative to the fact that all these people are humans, right? There are no treatments and no cures for what any of us have. Most of the medications that are given out are for late stage something or other, and they don't work. I'm sorry to say it quite frankly like that, but they don't work. For some people, one particular medication or something might work, and but I think for the most part, everybody will agree that across the board, they just don't work. They don't make any significant changes or differences in our lives. And being that these people are human, it's just not a comfortable topic when there's no hope involved. All of us have, the fact that diagnosis can only be confirmed at autopsy. So all of these professionals feel like they're just guessing, and they are. I mean, without going into the whole DSM thing, the DSM lays out the symptoms clearly. It's a checklist. It is a checklist. It's easy enough to diagnose somebody using the checklist. But one of the key factors
Edgar, I'm gonna interrupt for a second. A lot of people might not know what DMS is. So
it's the diagnostic manual that's used to determine mental conditions and that sort of thing. The Diagnostic Standard Manual, I believe it's called. Currently, we're on the DSM-5 version.
Mm-hmm.
But, under the neurocognitive disorders, which is what they changed it to in 2013, after 10 years of debate from, the biggest minds in the world, they settled on these things and these terms and these criteria. But they all come with probable or possible. There's nothing definitive in there, because they understand that there are probable or possible diagnoses. For example, Alzheimer's. The world knows Alzheimer's and other dementias. The DSM lists neurocognitive disorder due to Alzheimer's disease, which has very specific medical, parts. But it's not just Alzheimer's. It's no different than neurocognitive disorder due to Lewy body, or in my case, TBI. It's a standardized sort of framework for this thing, but nobody wants to do that because they're just used to the way they normally do it, and if you really want to understand our journeys, you have to consider the way cancer is done. Nobody just writes cancer. You don't go to a doctor and say, oh, you got cancer, and that's it. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard of anybody, oh yeah, you just got cancer, and they just write cancer in your. No, there's some kind of lymphoma, something, something that, they're after tests that they're going to put in your medical record. But with this thing, every time you go to a doctor, I had a doctor one time tell me that, and they teach this in some medical schools, that you can be prejudiced by the diagnosis of other physicians. Well, it's ludicrous. It's like saying your medical history is of no use to a doctor because they might be prejudiced by it. So your MRIs and your CAT scans and your PET scan, all that stuff is of no use when you go to another doctor and another doctor and another doctor, because they might be prejudiced by it. So they got to start from scratch. We've become commodities to a system, not to the individuals. They care, they want to help, but the system treats us like a commodity, right? I mean, I had a doctor tell me they don't use the DSM because that's only for mental disorders. We use the ICM. The ICM is an insurance code manual. There's nothing big diagnostically criteria about that thing.
Other
But
than
that's all
make
they
it
care
paid.
about. And this goes back to my comment about them being human, right? It's an completely uncomfortable topic because they can be of no help, as Michael said. They know they can't be of any help. And somehow telling you have what you have is doing you a disservice, when the disservice is not telling you what you have and what you face. It's not telling you what symptoms you need to look out for and what condition you need to deal with. It has taken me 30 years to get the simple diagnosis of major neurocognitive due to TBI. And that's after being sent to a doctor to be evaluated for MS, because of my physical issues. But somehow that has a more priority because it's more known, it's more understood. Yet this is part of the problem, right? You take, for example, that I am considered temporarily disabled by the VA for anxiety and depression, and and the physical side, temporarily. Now that means my kids don't get free college and all the benefits that come with permanent and total, even though it was an Army TBI clinic to diagnose me with TBI. It is the standard for the Veterans Administration that dementia is what they call a presumptive illness. If I have service connection for TBI, which I should, but they don't, then saying I have dementia is, they just assume, okay, well, because the science follows, well, sure, he can have dementia. I mean, they understand this on their side of policies, but where it impacts us, I can't even think of, one of those analogies, but I mean, it's like rocket science to get them to understand when they're the ones telling, like I told you earlier, when I went to Voc Rehab, they declared me unemployable. But yet the side that pays me considers me temporarily unemployable or temporarily disabled, like I'm going to get better. And I haven't worked. I mean, I'm 51 and I haven't worked since a failed fusion at 35. I don't even leave the house. I got PTSD. Basically agoraphobic in a sense. But yet somehow they're okay with this because it works for them. It's less ugly. It's more, I don't know what you call it, neurologists, some neurologists don't even know what FTD is, and when you talk about the medications, I wrote down the medications. If you go to, I think it's UCSF, they have a list of medications and they will tell you, if you take X medication for FTD, it will speed up your prognosis. I mean, it will speed up your progress. They understand these things, but they're not out there in the greater world because there's no urgency of getting us going back to cancer. There's no urgency of getting us back to a specialist at all. I mean, I can't even get a neurologist in the hospital system that we have. And you're going to love this, because when I was going through the MS hamster wheel, I went to one of their neurologists for a second opinion, spent 5 minutes with the guy, didn't like him at all because he looked at the MRI and said, "Oh, you don't have MS." I mean, sure, there's occasions where you can tell that for one reason or another, but I don't think it's a blanket diagnostic measure to just look at it and say, I'm so smart, I can tell you don't have it. And I didn't like him, so I didn't go back. And that's just one individual. But now I've seen a neurologist in their office, so I can't have another neurologist for another reason. And this goes back to what works for the Muggle world doesn't apply to us, doesn't help us in any way. It's just what's most convenient for them. For us, the best we can hope for is a 5-minute triage with a new doctor every time we go to the doctor, who's going to want to do all of the same tests again. And when we talk about tests, we talk about, as Michael said, those, the paper tests and all that. And I think I mentioned this company, CogniView, and, there's machines. My point is there are machines that you can go and sit in front of, and 10 minutes later have a cognitive assessment, because we understand better than anybody that there are no 100% guarantees on this topic. Yet, if they can't give us one, it's like they can't give us anything, other than tests that can be billed for. I went to a neurologist one time who told me, I can't treat you, I can't help you. And then they gave me blood tests for the way out. It's a system that has the potential to help us. And it's why I developed the framework that I did, because one of the key factors that is being missed is that right now, the scientific world is basically working with what I'll call stage 4 data, because all the stage 0 to stage 3 data is being dismissed and lost by all of these convenient actions that don't document Laurie's friend with the crayons and True and all of us in our various stages of diagnosis that come with the easiest answers for them, but then it just chucks out all the data to get us where we really need to go. Does that make sense?
It's definitely a complicated system. Any comments on what Edgar said?
I just want to add one thing here. Edgar mentioned about the drugs. I don't want people to think that the drugs don't work for you. It works for some people. It might work for 50% of the people, but the only way you know whether it works is by trying it. So if you do try it and it works, then it works for you. If you do try it, it don't work for you. So I do want people to have some hope out there for some folks.
Yes, and I will rephrase what I'm saying. It's just the drugs they're not across the board. They're not, you have a headache, you take an aspirin, right? The drugs are very individualized, I suppose is the issue. And yet sometimes, like I was, I've been doing this whole thing for a little while, and they put me on some patch. I can't tell you the name of it. It's for like late stage Alzheimer's. And it just destroyed me. Like Laurie was saying about one that she tried, it ruined me. I lost half my followers. I just couldn't function. And I was on it for weeks. I was on it for, probably a month or so, but it's such a guessing game, and there's no discussion ahead of time. There's just, here, try this and go.
Edgar, that's where you really have to make sure that your care partner, whoever that may be, is aware that I know of people that have taken this that got worse. If it seems as though I'm declining, make sure I get off of it. I mean, your care partner, we need a strong communication with our care partner, not from the standpoint of the doctor who's going to tell them whatever they want, but from our standpoint and what we know. And that's where too many people say, oh, well, the doctor said I should take this, or the doctor said she should take this. And too many people go, well, if the doctor said so, it's got to be true. No, it's just like saying, if the internet said it, it's got to be true. Well, we all know that's not the case,
Right.
And that's about the same. You can't go by what the doctor says without a communication with your care partner.
And wouldn't it be nice if the doctor would say, this can happen, instead of here's the magic bullet, because that's what everybody wants. And then wouldn't it also be nice is if it didn't work, somehow that data got reported? I think that would be very flipping interesting.
And I'm sorry, part of this the whole schema of this, and you're absolutely right, because that's, the framework is meant to do just that, for the no's and the yeses of everything. But we are, being who we are so, it is so easy for the Muggle world to disregard us, right? So if we say, oh, it's not working, or it's not, whatever we say, right, Shu, whatever we say negative can simply be just, what's the phrase, taken with a grain of salt and attributed to our condition. Our words aren't as valid as they once were. So our feedback is equally as, lacking of validity to those who really need it. I mean, I'm sure everybody here has gone through, and Laurie, you might remember this, when the terminology they use in the healthcare system as a whole, if you don't take your medications, the word they like to ascribe to that is how I lose it. It's not non-compliant.
Compliant.
I mean, I can't remember nothing. That doesn't make me non-compliant. But then when you dig through somebody's record, you see, oh, they're non-compliant. Like we're fighting against taking something. We just can't remember. I didn't remember to brush my teeth this morning either. What does that make me? It's this full misunderstanding of the condition and the effects on the validity of our feedback and what we say about this experience.
Karen, I want to get to you and then to Cate too, because I can't, we've got about 15 and 20 minutes left here. So Karen, what are you thinking about all this? What you got to add?
Well, there were quite a few things, but I go in blocks of thoughts. So, I just, what people think, the misdiagnosis for me was devastating because my dad was in late stage. Is that kind of where we are? Was devastating because when I got diagnosed, he was in late stage Alzheimer's. And then I'm, and it's like, so I immediately, my psychological part said, this is where I am, this is where I'm going, don't want to live anymore, kind of thing. Well, then it got changed to unspecified symptoms of dementia. Then it got changed to mild neurodegenerative disorder with probable dementia, and what I have learned through many years of meeting with everyone with different types and symptoms of dementia is I have brain change. I don't need a label. I don't need to go look at the label Alzheimer's and see the symptoms. Do I fit? Do I fit? Do I fit? I got some issues. So what am I going to do about it? Maybe I start doing some cognitive therapy. And I used to do that when I first got diagnosed. It's like, I'll be damned. You know what? I'm not doing that anymore. So get back into the brain games and, living life, but not being so mired down into this definition of this stuff. That's my thought.
I like that, just the brain change. It's simple. It isn't specific. And I mean, raise your hands if your symptoms change from day to day. Yeah. And to me, that's the one thing that blows my mind is when I talk with doctors and even family members, they don't understand how fluid this disease is and how symptoms change and what can even trigger them and make them worse and stuff. So thank you for that input.
And what makes them worse and what makes them better.
Yeah.
What can I do to make them better also?
Yeah, that's not discussed at all. Again, getting back to going to the doctor in terms of, what if any resources are even given to people going through this. Zippo, maybe the Alzheimer's Association here in the US, but still most are saying they don't even get that. And there's so many different groups. I mean, even that you guys are all involved with, nobody knows about them, until they happen to kind of happenstance run across somebody else with dementia. I mean, it's your voices that are really communicating the guts of hope and connecting people. So many DAA, Dementia Mentors, Us Against Alzheimer's, Alzheimer's Speaks, Dementia Map, all of those things are trying to connect people. Your lucidity, trying to connect people to different services, products, and tools that they can get involved with and have peers again. And that shouldn't be kind of a mistake that just happens on the street. That should be part of, in my opinion, part of the process and the diagnosis. If you can't help me, then tell me who can. Tell me where else to go. I mean, that really wouldn't take much. And it's just sad that we are still at that state. I mean, I look back, my mom's been gone since 2014.
Mm.
She lived with it for 30 years. Nothing really in the doctor's office has changed a whole heck of a lot. Other than most of them do give you your diagnosis in person, where we got it by mail. But Edgar and then Cate.
I just wanted to say, it's interesting you were talking about all the different organizations, and mine's a little different because it was developed more as a framework than to do what everybody else does. Because one of the things I tried to incorporate was using existing resources. And I mentioned that because something I've come across is the what I'll call the Muggle sensibility of, we already do that, or we're already trying to do this, or we're already, it's like an ownership of this problem that knows no boundaries. It doesn't money, race, country. When I developed this, I talked to people in Canada and the UK, even Sweden, and it's replicable everywhere, but not once it bumps up against, that ownership mentality. And that adds so significantly to our problem, because, you don't just have to find who helps you. You have to find who's owning that problem, who's pushing everybody else out of that area, and it becomes a different kind of thing than just helping people, if that makes sense.
I'm a little confused on the ownership, if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because when you first said it.
No, I mean, it's a bad thing in terms of, everybody wants like their organization to be the best. So, competing ideas and that, that whole aspect of competition, it shuts out ideas that could benefit everybody, because they don't want, one person doesn't want to help you do something. They'd rather try to do it themselves.
Yeah.
So everybody's trying to do one thing. It's like a bunch of it's like the whole Amish building a barn. It'd be like if every Amish guy was in that field trying to build their own barn.
Yeah. We're better together, and yet we're so siloed. And in between profit and nonprofit too, it magnifies it even more in that sense. Cate, I want to make sure that we hear from you as well.
We talk about medical progress in this country. It seems like we need to rewind here a little bit. Their perspective of dementia is just like it's Alzheimer's out there. They still don't know what dementia is. Most people don't know what dementia is. You have to say, I have Alzheimer's. Well, why don't we go back and learn from my grandma? My grandma's time, we just said that, oh, she's senile. That's what people are still stuck on, they're just senile, or they have Alzheimer's. When I was first diagnosed for Alzheimer's, for 2 years, I was on Alzheimer's medication, believing that I had Alzheimer's, because my neurologist, let's say, he really tried his very best. He called me on a weekend and was just ecstatic about it and said, Miss Lau, I think I found out what your diagnosis is. It is not Alzheimer's. You have what we call, I haven't seen this since medical school. I said, yes, what is it? I was very excited. He said it was multi-complex seizures. I said, so that's what it is. I do not have dementia. So I was all excited and told the family. So somebody told someone at my church, and then they said, oh, we heard that you don't have dementia. Oh, praise the Lord and all that, so you don't have dementia. I went like, whew. So I went back. I said, no, I don't believe that I have any kind of seizures because I have never had seizure symptoms. And I know that there are seizures that has no symptoms. You know, you don't fall, you don't, you know. So she said, okay, I'll send you to this university that specializes in seizures. I will name it, the place. Oh my gosh, that place was so huge, huge. I had to take shuttles within the, you know. So I went there and I spoke to actually the head of the department, and he said, so how many times have you had seizures? I said, I've never had a seizure. And then he said, so when you had your seizure, did you fall? I've never had a seizure. How would I know if I fell? I just didn't fall because I didn't have a seizure. So we went on and on. Then he asked my husband, she said, so when she had her seizure, did you turn her to the side or did you help her or whatever? My husband said, she never had a seizure. I said, and I don't even know why I'm here. And all right, we're going to do some tests and you might have to spend the night here. I've been like, but I don't have a seizure. Why am I at this seizure university for tests? So they did all kinds of tests. They put all those electrodes and things, like 100 of them, you know, like braids all over my head. And then they took all my medication away. And I said, are you going to follow my, you know, how I take my medication? Because sometimes you're in hospital, they change things a little bit. I said, I must have certain medication at the same time, and I must have my night medication, or else the next morning I will feel horrible. So I went to the seizure hospital, and I had all those things going on. And then they said, yes, we took all your medication because that's what doctor said. I mean, I just told you that I need certain medications or else I cannot function. They didn't listen to me. So they said, well, somebody will watch you. Up there, there's a tech, a specialist, and all she does is watch 3 people. Okay, she'll focus on 3 of you. So anytime you say hello, somebody is going to say hello back and how are you doing? So I said, hello. Nobody answered me. I said it several times. Nothing. But let's rewind to the complex seizure, multiple seizure. And the neurologist was the one that recommended me to this university. He says, we will find out here what you have because this is the top university for seizures. So they did the light thing, what do you call it? The strobe light. And, you know, I've had this done at one of the hospitals here, and it was quick and it was nothing. This woman came, zoomed at me, like really close, and she did like multiple of those things that I was talking about, light. And then after that, I went like a bit dizzy and, you know, and later I was saying that my feet, we just did all the tests, the pushing, the feet, everything to see how I was. I said, now my feet is beginning to feel very, very different. And then I was stretching my arm. I said, oh, I don't have any feeling on this arm. So I was totally paralyzed for a little while from here down to my thigh. And my husband was sitting there. I said, I can't feel anything. So I called to the whoever was up there. And I said that I can't feel anything. And then she said, ma'am, can you pull your sheets down? And I said, I can't move. It got better for me, you know. I said, I cannot move. I can't feel anything. I cannot move my arm. I don't know what to do. So she said, okay, we'll call the resident because doctor has left. The resident came in. She didn't know what to do. Nurses were running in, LPNs, RNs. And I said, you took my medication away. And that's one. The rest of it, I don't know. Well, long story short, because we don't have much time, they went to the computer and looked at my medication. I apparently had been to one of the hospitals, and what they did was they looked, and this was just oh, this was in 2014, I believe. And they said, oh, you went to this hospital and we are using the medication that they gave you in 2010. And so now we can't do anything because the doctor is not here. I said, get a doctor. I don't care which doctor it is. I said, give me my night medication, whatever it is. And I relaxed a little bit. And after that, I could feel the feeling, I could feel, I could feel my body beginning to work. I don't know if it's the medication, it's the strobe light, it's whatever, but I know one thing, they did not do a thing because they didn't know what to do. And they made a big mistake by giving me medication from years ago. So when I came back after 2 nights, went to my neurologist, and I said, I had no seizure, like I told you. And I was discharged, and on the paper, it said that I had no seizure. I said, you say I had multi-complex seizures. I do not have seizure. I'm forgetful. I get foggy. In the middle of something, I'll just forget what I was saying. And I've got so many other symptoms. And he says, well, this is it. I have the best second opinion neuropsychologist, but it's out of town. I said, I'll go if she's the best. She said, if she says that you have dementia of whatever kind, then you have dementia. I went like, what is this? A quiz? He doesn't even know I have dementia or seizures, or so you send me to somebody else. So the neuropsych tested me. I totally flunked half of the questions, 8 hours. She said 4. I said, you can go back and come back. I said, out of town, I'm not. It was winter, put me in a small room. The heat was so horrible. They turned up the temperature on the, on the thermostat. And I went like, oh my goodness, I cannot. And you have to do so many of those psychological questions. Did you love your mom? Would you kill your mom? I went like, oh, wow. So I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It's a long journey. So I went back and saw my neurologist. And after that, they changed my neurologist. I never saw him again, never. And he's still there. He's a good man and he was trying his best, but he needs to go back. Every now and then, I think they need what we caregivers call in-service. You need a refresher's course that there's such a thing, not only dementia and Alzheimer's, you need to know what FTD is, okay? So I went, and then that's the only time I've ever been back to see a neuropsych. I said, I want another test. And well, before I did that, yeah, she was the one that diagnosed me for Alzheimer's. I want another test. I don't think I have Alzheimer's. I've been reading up on this, and Max Wallach and I were, we're friends, and we, talk about his grandma and things like that. So I went like, okay, I'm going back. And she said to me, Cate, I think you have frontal lobe dementia. It's your frontal lobe. So CAT scan again, all those things again. And okay, now I have BVFTD. And how much loss we have, like Michael said, we can drive, we can work. Yes, it happens to most of us here. My biggest loss was I lost the ability to hold my 2 grandchildren when they were born because I was not trusted anymore. Because first it was Alzheimer's. And then after that, I lost the joy of my life to play with my grandchildren on my own. There's always like somebody has to supervise me. And it became a problem in the family. There was a rift, in the family. And I said, see, when you want me to babysit, you leave them here. And then you don't trust me. But you say, well, but Ellen's always around, I mean, like, oh my goodness. And that is the worst thing until today. I took care of one of my grandsons, and he's now 7, and he could not spend the night for the past 3 years when he spent about every night here. And that's my biggest loss. My grandkids, my family not quite supportive, and then lost your friends because you said, okay, we'll go to this place. And suddenly it all changed in like within minutes. Your mood changed, everything changed, and you feel so tired. So you call and you say, I can't go. Your friends think that, wow, how many times has she stood me up? So you lose your friends, you lose a lot of things.
Yeah, you really do. And I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to keep to our hour here. You guys have covered a lot of ground. And I really hope that people will push this out. I hope this gets into universities and doctors' clinics and so forth. They've got so much to learn. As I was listening to all of you, I thought maybe what they should do is upon diagnosis, send them to a panel of people living with dementia and see how accurate they are versus the doctor's diagnoses, because you guys are so in tune to the symptoms and so incredibly knowledgeable as to what is going on and how it works. I find it just fascinating because, you've all said, well, I can tell, well, that person doesn't have that. I mean, it's so, for you guys, it's so matter of fact and so evident because you're so ingrained in this. And wouldn't it be nice if our doctors were that ingrained and that in tune? Edgar, go ahead.
I hereby propose the 2022 Lori La Bey tour of medical schools.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Laurie, I'll make this very, very quick. My psychiatrist is the only doctor I should see. He's the only doctor that comes from another hospital, and he is also one of the fellows at the University of Illinois. He said, you tell your doctors at that clinic, do not mess with my medication, and you tell all of them that I say so. The more doctors you see, the more complicated it is. I always tell my patients that. It gets more complicated. PCP, now that the neurologist has diagnosed you, and with BVFTD, he knows more. He's a psychiatrist, okay? He said, with BVFTD, there's nothing neurology can do for you. If that is what they say, that is it. You go to your PCP in case you have problems with other things, You say, the rest of them, don't see them. All they do is change my medication for you, and that is very, very dangerous because this medication and this medication belongs to one family. And you can get addicted to this one, but not that one. Mm-hmm. And they did it again. And I think he charted it and they use Epic. And so now they can see each other's charts and notes and everything.
It's amazing how much you guys have learned through this process.
I just went for surgery, for my carotid surgery, and the nurse left the chart there on the cart. And I'm very nosy, okay? I mean, I'm my own advocate. So I picked at it, and it says that neurologist's note is like undetermined. And I look again, that I have COPD. I've never been diagnosed for COPD. I get COPD, no COPD, but yes to BVFTD. But I didn't say anything to them because I think they're just clueless. So what's the point? So,
well, and once it's in the chart, I mean, it's hard to get it out of the chart.
Yes.
We're going to go ahead and wrap up. Again, I thank you all for your time here. This was a really interesting conversation. And again, to our listeners, I hope you like, click, and share and pass this around. There was so much great information and good ideas. Again, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you next time.